There are wounds that never heal. Not because they are deep, but because they come from the people you love the most. 3 days ago, my own son stood in front of me, pointed toward the front door, and said, "Dad, it's time for you to leave." I looked at him, hoping he was joking. He wasn't. His wife stood behind him with her arms crossed. Neither of them cared that I had nowhere to go. They believed I was just an old man, a burden, someone who had nothing left to offer. So I picked up one small suitcase, walked out of the house, and never looked back. What they didn't know was that exactly 72 hours later, everything they believed about me would collapse, and my son would be standing at my door, begging. But to understand why, you first need to know how a father can spend an entire lifetime building a family, only to be thrown away when he's no longer needed. My name is James Carter. I'm 69 years old. For 45 years, I worked as a civil engineer. I wasn't rich. I wasn't famous. But I was proud of the life my wife, Linda, and I built together. Every paycheck had a purpose. A roof over our heads, food on the table, and a future for our only son, Michael. When Michael was 10, he wanted a bicycle. I worked every weekend for 2 months just to buy it. When he dreamed of going to college, I sold the fishing boat I'd owned for 20 years. When he wanted to start a business, I emptied nearly all of my savings without thinking twice. Because that's what parents do. We give, even when it hurts. 5 years ago, Linda passed away after a long battle with cancer. The silence she left behind was unbearable. The house no longer felt like home. One evening, Michael came to visit. He put his hand on my shoulder and smiled. "Dad, you shouldn't be alone. Come live with us. We'll take care of you." Those words filled my heart with hope. For the first time since losing Linda, I felt like I still belonged somewhere. So I sold my little house. Most of the money went into safe investments. The rest stayed untouched. I never told anyone how much I had. Money had never mattered to me. Family did. At first, life was wonderful. My granddaughter, Sophie, was 7 years old. Every morning she'd run into my room shouting, "Grandpa, pancakes." We baked cookies together, read bedtime stories, built puzzles. She reminded me so much of Linda. Her laughter brought life back into my heart. For a while, everything felt perfect. Then, little things started changing. Michael worked longer hours. He smiled less. He barely spoke during dinner. And his wife, Emily, began looking at me differently. Not with kindness, but with annoyance. It started with simple comments. "James, could you keep your shoes in your room? James, please don't leave the TV on. James, you're using too much hot water." I apologized every single time. I didn't want to cause problems. So I stayed quiet, spent more time in my room, ate lunch alone. I thought if I became invisible, peace would return. Instead, things became worse. One evening, I walked downstairs for a glass of water. Their kitchen door was slightly open. I wasn't trying to listen, but then I heard Emily's voice. "How much longer is your father staying here?" Michael sighed. "I don't know. We can't keep living like this. He's taking up space." Those 4 words froze me where I stood. He's taking up space. Not, he needs us. Not, he's family. Just space. I quietly returned to my bedroom, closed the door, picked up Linda's old photograph, and whispered, "I miss you." Because for the first time since she died, I truly understood what loneliness felt like. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept asking myself the same question. Where did I go wrong? Was I too quiet? Too old? Too dependent? Or had the world simply changed? I had no idea. That by the end of the week, my own son would ask me to leave the house, and unknowingly make the biggest mistake of his life. The next morning, the house felt different. No one spoke during breakfast. Emily scrolled through her phone without looking up. Michael kept staring at his coffee. And little Sophie. She was the only one smiling. "Grandpa," she said excitedly, "can we go to the park after school? I want to feed the ducks." Before I could answer, Emily interrupted. "Not today." Sophie frowned. "But why?" "Because Grandpa is busy." I looked at Emily. I wasn't busy. But I smiled at Sophie anyway. "Maybe tomorrow, sweetheart." She nodded with a disappointed smile. As she left for school, she hugged me tightly. "I love you, Grandpa." "I love you too." I watched the front door close. Somehow, I had a feeling everything was about to change. That afternoon, Michael came home much earlier than usual. He looked exhausted. His tie was loose. His shoulders were heavy. He walked straight into the kitchen. Seconds later, Emily began shouting, "You promised me this wouldn't happen." "I know. You said the business would recover." "I'm trying." Trying? I had never heard my son sound so defeated. I quietly walked back toward my room. But before I reached the stairs, Michael called my name. "Dad, can we talk?" I smiled. "Of course." We sat on the back porch. For several minutes, neither of us spoke. Finally, Michael took a deep breath. "Dad, my construction company, it's failing." I stayed quiet. The bank refused another loan. "I don't know what to do." His voice trembled. For a moment, he wasn't a grown businessman. He was my little boy again, the one who used to scrape his knees riding a bicycle. I placed my hand on his shoulder. "We'll figure something out." He looked at me with tired eyes. "I've failed." "No, you've made mistakes." "That's different." He smiled for the first time in weeks. That evening, I went into my room, opened an old wooden drawer. Inside was an envelope. Cash. Nearly $5,000. Money I had saved for emergencies. I walked downstairs, placed it on the table. "Take it." Michael looked shocked. "Dad, I can't." "You can. It's not much, but maybe it'll buy you some time." Before he could answer, Emily walked into the room. She looked at the envelope, then laughed quietly. $5,000? She shook her head. "Our debts are over $600,000. This changes nothing." I slowly picked up the envelope again. Not because she rejected the money, but because of how she rejected it. Without gratitude. Without respect. Michael lowered his head. "I'm sorry, Dad." I smiled gently. "You don't need to apologize." But deep inside, something had begun to break. The following morning, a black SUV stopped outside the house. Two men in dark suits stepped out. One carried a leather briefcase. The other held several documents. They spoke with Michael on the driveway. From my bedroom window, I watched his face slowly lose all color. After nearly 20 minutes, the men handed him an envelope, then drove away. Michael stood frozen, staring at the papers in his hands. When he finally walked inside, Emily rushed toward him. "What happened?" He didn't answer. "What did they say?" Finally, he whispered, "We have 30 days. Emily's face turned pale. 30 days for what? They're starting foreclosure. If we don't pay, we lose the house. The room became silent. I could hear the ticking clock on the wall. Emily slowly turned toward me. Her expression changed. It wasn't fear anymore. It was anger. As if she had suddenly decided everything was somehow my fault. She looked directly at Michael, then said the words that changed everything. "We need one less mouth to feed." Michael closed his eyes. He didn't answer, but he didn't disagree either. And in that moment, I realized something that hurt more than anything else. Sometimes, silence is louder than words. The next morning, no one said a word. The house felt colder than ever. Michael sat at the dining table, staring blankly at the foreclosure notice. Emily stood by the kitchen window with her arms crossed. I quietly poured myself a cup of coffee. As I turned to leave, Emily finally spoke. "We've made a decision." I looked at Michael. He kept his eyes on the floor. "We can't afford this anymore," Emily continued. "You'll have to leave." The words echoed through the room. I waited, hoping my son would stop her. Instead, he slowly looked up, his voice barely above a whisper. "Dad, I think she's right." It felt as if the air had disappeared from the room. I searched his face. Not for an explanation, not for an excuse, just for the little boy I used to know. But he was gone. I nodded quietly. "If that's what you both want, I'll leave." Neither of them spoke. I walked upstairs, closed my bedroom door, and looked around the small room that had been my home for 5 years. There wasn't much to pack. A few shirts, 2 pairs of shoes, my medication, Linda's photograph, and the drawing Sophie had made that read, "My best friend." I carefully folded it and placed it inside my suitcase. Then I whispered, "Linda, I never imagined our family would end like this." Just as I zipped the suitcase, a soft knock came at the door. It was Sophie. She smiled when she saw me. Then she noticed the suitcase. "Grandpa, are you going somewhere?" I knelt beside her. "Just for a little while." Her smile disappeared. "Did I do something wrong?" My heart shattered. "No, sweetheart. You did everything right." She wrapped her tiny arms around my neck. "I don't want you to leave." Neither did I. But some promises are impossible to keep. I kissed her forehead. "You'll always find me right here." I gently placed my hand over her heart. She began to cry. "I love you, Grandpa. I love you more than you'll ever know." As I walked downstairs, Michael was waiting near the front door. He looked broken. "Dad, I'm sorry." I smiled sadly. "One day, you'll understand that success isn't measured by money. It's measured by how you treat the people who stood beside you when you had nothing." He lowered his head. "I know. No, you don't. Not yet." I picked up my suitcase, opened the front door, and walked away, without looking back. Outside, the autumn wind felt colder than usual. For the first time in my life, I had nowhere to go. I walked for nearly an hour before reaching a quiet park. Children laughed in the distance. Birds circled above the lake. Life carried on, as if nothing had happened. I sat on an old wooden bench, reached into my coat pocket, and pulled out a small black leather card holder. Inside was a single business card. It read, "James Carter, Chairman, Carter Legacy Holdings." I smiled. For years, I hoped I'd never need this. I took out my phone and made one call. The person answered immediately. "Good afternoon, Mr. Carter. We've been waiting for your call. I'll be there in 30 minutes. A black luxury sedan arrived exactly 28 minutes later. The driver stepped out, opened the rear door. "Welcome back, sir." As we drove through the city, I looked out the window. Not with anger, not with revenge, only sadness. Money had never mattered to me. Family had. But sometimes, the people you love don't realize your value until you're gone. The car stopped in front of a stunning glass skyscraper. Employees greeted me with warm smiles. "Welcome back, Mr. Carter. The board is waiting." I walked through the marble lobby, not as a homeless old man, but as the founder of a billion-dollar investment company I had quietly built decades ago. Very few people knew the truth. Not even Michael. When Linda became ill, I stepped away from the business. I wanted to spend every remaining moment with her. After she passed, I wanted a simple life with my family. I never imagined that my greatest investment would become the greatest secret of my life. As the elevator doors opened to the executive floor, I took one deep breath. Because in less than 72 hours, Michael would discover who his father really was. And by then, it would already be too late. The executive boardroom was silent as I entered. 12 executives stood to greet me. "Good morning, Mr. Carter." I nodded politely. "Please have a seat." The meeting lasted nearly an hour. We discussed new investments, charity projects, and the company's future. When everyone had left, my assistant Sarah remained behind. She placed a folder on my desk. "Sir, I thought you should see this." Inside were public foreclosure records. Michael's house would be auctioned in 2 days. Sarah looked at me carefully. "If you want, we can pay off the debt immediately." I slowly closed the folder. "No." She looked surprised. "But sir, I've spent my entire life solving my son's problems. If I save him again without teaching him anything, he'll lose far more than a house." Sarah quietly nodded. "I understand." That evening, I sat alone in the garden outside my new home. I looked at Linda's photograph. "I wish you were here. You always knew how to keep this family together." A gentle breeze moved through the trees. For a moment, I almost felt she was beside me. The next morning, my phone rang. It was Sophie. She was crying. "Grandpa, they took our house. We're staying in a hotel. I miss you." Tears filled my eyes. "I miss you too, sweetheart. Will you come see me?" "I promise. I'll see you very soon." Exactly 72 hours after I left, the doorbell rang. I opened the door. Standing there was Michael. His suit was wrinkled. His eyes were red from crying. Behind him stood Emily. She looked completely different. The confidence, the pride, the anger, it was all gone. Michael looked at me for several seconds. Then, to my complete surprise, he fell to his knees. "Dad, I'm so sorry. I was selfish. I let fear control me. I chose money over family, and I lost both. Emily wiped away tears. I treated you like a burden. You deserved respect. Instead, I pushed you out. I'll regret it for the rest of my life. For a long moment, no one spoke. Then little Sophie ran past them. Grandpa! She wrapped her arms around me. I knew you'd come back. I hugged her tightly. I never left, sweetheart. I invited them inside. As Michael walked through the front door, he stopped. His eyes slowly scanned the beautiful home, the artwork, the library, the grand staircase. Dad, you live here? I smiled. Yes. He looked completely confused. I don't understand. I walked to my office, opened a drawer, and placed several documents on the table. The company ownership papers, investment records, property deeds. Michael picked them up with trembling hands. His face turned white. You own Carter Legacy Holdings? I nodded. I founded it 30 years ago. And after selling my engineering company, I invested every dollar. It grew far beyond anything I ever imagined. Michael could barely speak. You were wealthy? I never hid it. You simply never asked. I wanted my family to love me, not my bank account. Michael buried his face in his hands. I threw away the greatest man I've ever known. No, you threw away your father. And that's far more painful. He began crying uncontrollably. I'm sorry. I know those words can't erase what I did. But if there's even the smallest chance, I want to earn back your trust. Emily stepped forward. I do too. I've started volunteering at a senior care center. I finally understand how lonely older people can feel. I wish I had understood sooner. I looked at both of them, then at Sophie. Finally, I spoke. I can replace money. I can replace houses. But none of us can replace lost time. If we're going to rebuild this family, it won't happen because of guilt. It will happen because we choose kindness every single day. Michael nodded. I promise. This time, I'll be the son you always deserved. 6 months later, life looked very different. Michael had found a new job. Not because I gave him one. Because he earned it. Emily continued volunteering every weekend. She often told people, the elderly don't need our pity. They need our respect. Sophie visited every Saturday. We baked cookies, read stories, and planted flowers in the garden Linda once dreamed of having. One afternoon, Sophie asked, Grandpa, why did you forgive Dad? I smiled. Because forgiveness isn't forgetting. It's giving someone the chance to become better. She thought for a moment, then smiled. I want to be like you when I grow up. I laughed softly. Just be kind. The world always needs more kind people. As the sun set behind the trees, I looked toward the sky. Linda, our family isn't perfect. It never will be. But love found its way home. And in that quiet moment, I realized something priceless. The greatest inheritance you can leave your children isn't wealth. It's the example of compassion, forgiveness, and unconditional love.